reader. Welcome to Reading Bug Adventures, created, written, and produced by The Reading Bug, our family-owned children's bookstore in California. Please visit us online at thereadingbug.com and readingbugbox.com. Our whole team is hard at work writing, recording, and producing a whole new season of adventures. Let us know where you'd like to adventure to next season by emailing me at lauren@readingbugadventures.com or send your ideas to us on Twitter or Facebook at The Reading Bug. And be sure to subscribe to this channel so you're the first to know when new episodes are released. While we all wait for new adventures, we wanted to introduce you to some great authors in bonus episodes like this one. We often have authors visiting our store and the schools nearby, and when they visit, we ask them questions that we can share with you. Our author interviews are different from our original stories and are suitable for all ages, but they may mostly appeal to kids who are learning to draw or write, and for parents, families, or anyone who wants to learn and discover the latest and greatest books and authors in children's literature. This week, we've got a great interview with Judy Schachner, author and illustrator of the Skippyjon Jones books, Sarabella's Thinking Cap, and many more. To purchase any of the books in today's podcast, please visit thereadingbug.com/authors. So reader, are you ready? Let's fly to our bookstore in California together. It's time for a Reading Bug Adventures author visit.
Hi, Lauren. Hi, reader.
Oh, hello there, Reading Bug. I'm glad you're here. I'm excited because today I get to interview Judy Schachner. Do you know who she is?
Oh, yes, of course I do. She wrote and illustrated one of my favorites, Skippyjon Jones. Everyone knows from my big ears to my toes, I am not a Siamese cat. I am Skippyjon Jones, a chihuahua to my bones.
Good Skippyjon Jones voice, Reading Bug. Judy also wrote and illustrated Dewey Bob. And did you know that she recently wrote and illustrated another beautiful picture book, Sarabella's Thinking Cap?
Whoa, I did not know that, Lauren. I better get back to my reading. I'll talk to you later, right after I buy a copy of Sarabella's Thinking Cap from the Reading Bug, my local independent bookstore. Remember, everybody, shop local. Okay, now I've really got to fly.
All right, Reading Bug. We'll see you later. Right now, I'm going to talk to Judy so we can hear more about her work.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's start with Skippyjon Jones.
Okay.
And my kids laugh out loud at these stories, no matter how poorly I do the voice, and we want to hear you do the voice in a little bit, of course. Where did this crazy character originate?
That's very easy. Skippyjon Jones was our cat. He was a Siamese kitten. He had a very large head. He had huge ears, and he looked more like a chihuahua than a cat. And one morning he came down into the kitchen, had some kitty crunchies, went down into the basement, dug a tunnel to China, then followed by a pyramid, and then a bee came into our basement and stung him on top of his little noggin, and it began to swell. And I picked him up and I held him. I was so worried, and I said, Skippy, I'm going to have to take you to the veterinarian. And that was when the first milagro happened. And he said, Mamalita, I see the fire of love burning in your heart for me. And all I want to do is to stop, to drop, and to roll. And that's where it all began. Simple as that.
That is excellent. You have so many Skippyjon Jones books. Do you have a favorite?
Oh, gosh. Actually, probably the Big Bones might be one of my favorites because my daughter, Emma, is a paleontologist, and she said, I'll never forgive you if you don't do a book about Skippy and the dinosaurs. So I did, and she helped. She was my technical advisor on making sure the dinosaurs were not too fictionalized, that they were based in some, reality. And I just love the fact that those little chihuahuas were on Mount Ichikichigamba doing the rumba. And there's that whole crazy, I don't know if you've read Big Bones yet, but there's a really crazy, strange chant in it. And I really remember doing that, just standing on my head to get it right. So it is one of my favorites, the T-Mexito. And he, makes a big Jurassic bark. And so I'd say that was one of my favorites.
Excellent.
Snow White is one of my favorites too.
I like Snow White too. That's a nice one. I
Snow
like the cover on that as well. I love Little Face.
Yeah.
And the CD
It's
included
adorable.
in this one is always great. I love
and my
listening to
daughter
those.
Sarah did the little bit of music. That's a little Skippy, fluffy, fuzzy little theme. That's Sarah. That's Sarabella.
That's
Actually, Sarabella wrote that music.
That's so neat. So you've been visiting schools throughout the country for many years.
26 years.
26 years. So okay. You need to tell me a little bit about Antonio Banderas.
Antonio Banderas?
Yes.
He's the love of my life. He is also the voice of the Nasonex B. I have made many thousands of people say Nasonex, and nobody knows why they're saying it, but when they say it, oh yes, they know. So, Skippy also, around the time that I used to go to schools and talk about my cat, and if there was this, a Latino population in the schools, then whenever I spoke just a little bit of Spanish to those children, they brightened up. And I used to just tell a story about Skippy and how, he spoke to me with a Spanish accent. I studied Spanish in high school. I remember about 10 words, but I've always had a good ear for the sound of languages. And I loved pretending to speak. And Skippy's 4 years old. He thinks he speaks Spanish. I know he doesn't really speak Spanish. Some people get mad at me because they think that I am making fun of them, and I'm not. It's all about a cat who feels more comfortable with a band of Chihuahuas than he does with his sisters and his mother. She's a single parent. She was briefly married to Tom Jones. He wrote What's New Pussycat just for her. And, like tomcats, they leave their litters. So she works hard to raise her little kittens. But Skippy looks at his sisters. They have small heads. He has a big head. And he believes, I'm not a Siamese cat, I'm a Chihuahua. So Antonio Banderas, at the time that I was telling this story in school, before it was a book, we watched Zorro. And Zorro was my favorite television show, Disney television show, when I was a little kid, back in the 50s, and I guess the 60s. And then, of course, I'm watching Zorro with my family. And I hear Antonio Banderas say, I'm a great sword fighter. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I need to be. Well, Skippy began sounding like him. So when I spoke to my cat, he spoke to me as, oh yes.
Does Antonio know this?
Well, a long time ago, I would hope that because, there are a few movie stars, and John Leguizamo loves Skippy. And I found out through, that the drummer for Nine Inch Nails loves Skippy. My daughter is a composer, and she was doing something with the drummer from Nine Inch Nails, and somehow it came up that, oh, my mom writes children's books. He goes, really? Schachner sounds familiar. Yeah, she said Skippyjon Jones. He goes, oh my God, I read those to my kids every night. So, and Gwyneth Paltrow, and there were a few people.
Yeah.
But I always heard him as the voice of Skippy. So years ago, we visited DreamWorks because, of course, some people have been interested in turning it into a movie. And I mentioned Antonio Banderas, and he said, well, I think he was maybe Puss in Boots was coming out.
Yes.
So people have said, oh, you should write to him or somehow tell him that he is the inspiration, and I figure if he could be the voice of a Nasonex bee, he wouldn't mind. I think this is like an upgrade.
I would say so.
So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, but Antonio, where are you? Antonio,
Oh,
come
yes,
to us.
Come to us. I will say Nasonex to you.
So let's talk about some of your other books. Dewey Bob. Dewey's a collector.
He is.
Now, go ahead.
No, he's a collector mainly of buttons and the lost and tossed things of the world. So his favorite shopping place is at the dump, where he'll takes his fishing rod and he'll pull out a boot, or pull out an old spring or an old clock or whatever, and he makes art. Well, he repurposes and fixes the practical things, and then he will create something and he doesn't know what he's made, but he'll call it art, which was, I thought, what a lot of art in museums is kind of like. People don't really know what it is, but when you don't, you call it art.
And you have a lot of art in your home. What kind of inspirational pieces do you have there that you use?
Well, I have a favorite painter friend whose name is Perky Edgerton, and she is a wonderful painter, and I have quite a few of her paintings. I have a whole collection. We had a dog named Buster whose sole desire in life was to drive our car. He would spend sometimes 8 hours in the car. We couldn't get him out, not even with a piece of steak, and he would tremble when you came near. He was an adopted pit bull. He was white with around circle, round circle around his eye. What was I saying? I'm tired.
That's okay. That is okay.
I was talking about
the art in the art in your home, the
so
paintings.
I have a lot of paintings that I've done of Buster over the years, and I have a lot of repurposed stuff that I picked up off the streets and repainted, and I paint doors. My mom died when I was really young, so I got to missing her one day, so I painted her portrait on my coat closet door with me sitting in her lap, so I get to see her every day. Yeah. I've painted Skippy and Buster and Tink on my front door, and when the UPS man came one day, he said, "Wait, are you Skippy?" I said, "Yes, how did you know?" He said, "Well, you painted him on your front door." So, I forgot. Yeah, so I have collections. I have a huge collection of buttons, and I wanted to use my buttons somehow in this book. So Dewey's kind of like me. He's also somewhat of an introvert. He spends his time alone until he realizes he's missing the best collection of the world, and that would be friends.
Wow. So let's move on to Sarabella, because this is your brand new book.
My brand new book.
And it's very, very beautiful. I think the art is my favorite of all of your books.
Thank you.
There's a few pages, especially the whale and the elephant, that are my two absolute favorites.
Thank you.
And for viewers on our Instagram page at readingbugbox.com or at readingbugbox, you can actually view a picture of our full window display with all of Judy's work.
Which is the most beautiful window display I have ever seen.
Thank
you. It is sparkly.
It is sparkly.
It has the pictures from the book. You must come by and see it. It's really beautiful, and I thank you from the bottom of my fuzzy...
Well, it's very easy to create art from art, I think. I mean, it's very inspirational what was in the book, and I think putting it out in a big display, I mean, it's just another way to view what's in a book. And I think sometimes I don't think art translates on the page as well as it does out in 3D. What do you think of that? I mean, so you have three-dimensional objects in your house.
I do.
And then you have to translate them to a page. Is that a challenge?
Well, mostly I would say, I wouldn't say I take or create my art from like three-dimensional things in my house so much as I might be inspired by the patina on a piece of old furniture. And that's true, because I'm really into texture, and I layer lots of paint, so I use a lot of acrylic gouache and pastel pencils and colored pencils, and I layer things. It's very labor-intensive artwork. So I'm really excited by old furniture with old, beautiful patinas and colors coming through the top coat. So that's probably. But in Dewey, a lot of the buttons, those are my real buttons. So I made a photocopy of. I spread my buttons out on a piece of paper, and I photographed them and made a copy of them, and then I painted buttons too. So, but mostly it comes out of my head. It's just kind of stuff that lives in a corner in the back of my brain. Yeah. I open the door. Come on.
Oh, one more story we have to talk about.
What?
Yo, Vikings.
Yo.
Yo.
Yo, if you're from Philadelphia, yo.
Yes.
Yeah, well, just to make a short story long, Emma Schachner was turning 10 years old, and she wanted a Viking ship. And because she had learned about Eric the Red, and that was her Viking in school. She learned that the Vikings landed in America 500 years before Christopher Columbus. Didn't understand why we didn't get October 9th off, which was Leif Erikson's birthday. Why do we get Christopher Columbus Day? She used to wear a shirt to school that said Leif landed first.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So she wanted a Viking ship for her birthday. It makes sense. She didn't want a Lego kit. She didn't want one of those swing sets in the backyard that looked like a ship. She wanted a real Viking ship. Well, Life is Stranger Than Fiction. There was an advertisement in the Sunday paper, Philadelphia Inquirer. It said, Viking ship for sale, buy or burn. 29-foot Viking ship owned by a little old Norse woman who took it out on weekend raiding parties. And they went on to say that if they didn't sell it, they were going to burn it in the Schuylkill River, give it a Viking funeral. It was $7,000 a best offer. My husband showed it to Emma. Emma saw best offer. She convinced her little sister to shake out the piggy bank. They came up with $108 in nickels, dimes, and quarters. They wrote a very funny letter decorated with Viking ships. Sarah wrote Ina and Inga all over it. And Emma said, whatever you do, don't burn the boat. It would be a waste. Long live Odin. Send it to us. We can't afford it, but here. And she put in a little fox tooth and a baseball card to sweeten the deal. Well, nobody else made an offer for the ship. And we ended up with a 29-foot Viking ship in our backyard. And one day there was a knock at my door, and this burly truck driver was at the door, and he said, Philadelphia. Yo, lady, is that a Viking ship in your backyard? Because the dragon's head stuck up way over the bushes. And I said, yes. He said, you mind if I go out and climb on it? I said, no, go ahead. So I ran to my journal as he ran to the boat, and I wrote, Yo, Vikings. And I knew, my kids were grown by that time. I knew that one day I would have to write that story. Yeah. And the strangest, and which I didn't tell today, and no one believes this story. Kids say, that's not real, until I show them the real ship. And then they go, whoa. Well, my daughters had gone off to school and their adventures, and when the ship got old and too decrepit, we gave it a Viking burial in the front yard, and we had this fern garden, and so there was a mound in our front yard, and I planted the tail on one end, and sometimes I put the dragon's head on the other. This time, this day, I had just had the tail, and there was another knock on my door, and we had new neighbors from Norway, big, strapping blonde man, and he goes, I'm your new neighbor, how do you do? I'm Sven. And he said, yeah, is that a Viking ship you have buried in your front yard? And I said, as a matter of fact, it is. He said, well, I'm a shipbuilder. And he said, my papa was a shipbuilder, my grandfather, I'm a Viking man. And he said, I cannot believe I moved next door to a Viking ship, mound. I said, yes, you have moved into a strange neighborhood. So, but my girls were always grateful. They always said, Mom, giving us that ship made us realize you can go for your dreams. And it's the truth. Put a little elbow grease, I told you my great-grandmother was Ralph Waldo Emerson's cook, and I wrote Mr. Emerson's Cook. And then my very first book was about Willie and May, about my great-aunt May and her little bird, Willie, who sat on her fuzzy gray head. And without her help, we would have had some rough times. So that was my first book, but I illustrated 3 books for Donna Jo Napoli. And Laura McGee Kwasniewski. I did her first picture book, which I think she should have illustrated because I think she's a wonderful illustrator. And I illustrated a book for Allison Jackson, I Know an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Pie. And wow, this was wonderful. I got to illustrate Lloyd Alexander's very last picture book before he died. And it was a folktale called How the Cat Swallowed Thunder. So... But in between, I lied to an editor and said I could write, and then there you have it. So.
Pretty sure you can write.
Well, sure. If you can tell a good story. Yes. You don't know how to have to use the semicolon. Let me say that again. You do not know how. You do not have to know how to use a semicolon. But if you can tell a good story, and most kids can tell good stories. Yeah. They go on and on and on. Yeah. That's all you need. Imagination.
So every book starts with a notebook.
Every book I do begins with what I call a character Bible. I'm not a religious person, but I believe in this book. So character Bibles, my books are all character driven. So I usually have a character in mind. But I'm not a trained writer. I'm really professional 8-year-old. So I don't call myself a confident writer. So I'm very scared when an editor tells me, well, I've got to begin a new book. A white sheet of paper is the most frightening thing of all for a writer not for me, to just start writing down a story. So this way, I don't really know where the story is going to go. And these books are just free-form, intuitive collage. I'll spend time trying to sketch a character. I don't know how she's going to, I don't want to do a portrait of my daughter. This is a book about my daughter, Sarabella, and a little bit of me, especially our personalities. So I'm not looking to do a portrait. I'm just looking to create a character. I invited Frida Kahlo to paint on Sarabella's thinking cap here. But so I cut things out of magazines. I cut things out of newspapers. I might find a quote. What does that quote say? Can you read that?
What stories will you tell?
Yeah, I don't know where I got that from, but it's a good one. So I glued it in there. I love working on tracing paper, and I love, the layers.
And that one says best year yet underneath.
Best year yet, and maybe it will be. There's an interpretation of what Sarabella could look like. There is the real Sarabella. So I get things out of magazines. I paint on the paper. It's very freeing, and it's very comfortable and comforting. I could make these books forever.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So how many revisions do you go through? Or do you have so many more pages than actually make it into the book? Or
a few more pages. And to tell you the truth, after I go through this, I sit down with my editor and I talk the book to her. And then I make I reduced the book down to like this size, so it's smaller than this book. And then I start drawing the pictures. I kind of see where I want it to go. And then I write everything out by hand on like mailing labels and or double stick tape, and I stick on the text. And if I don't like the text, I remove it. If I get stuck on the words, then I move on with the pictures. So I am it's like parallel play. I'm doing two things at once, and it works well that way. I didn't go through very many changes in this book. I just drew it, wrote the story. Maybe I need to add a page here, maybe need to change that. Maybe I better not have a full-size Abraham Lincoln walking on his way to school with Sarah. You know, that kind of thing. So, and I have a wonderful editor that doesn't pressure me, Lucia Monfried from Dial. Penguin. She just lets me go. Just leave her alone. And everybody at Penguin says, when is the book going to be done? I mean, I usually do a book a year, but I know I hand them in late. And I don't hand much in beforehand to anyone. And Lucia just says, leave her alone. This is the way she works. She does say I am the most organic person she's ever worked with. And I thought, might be a nice way of saying, so weird. I don't understand what you do.
But everybody works differently, right? And I think the best page, though, if you'll go to that bookmark page that we put in there, this is my favorite, and I think this is really important for kids to see. It says down here, Judith needs to work faster and finish her work every day.
That's actually a letter from my editor. But anyway, no, that's my report card that's my 5th grade teacher, but that was something that was in my report cards every year. And you know, it's the beginning of a school year for most children across the country. And every year I had the hope that this year I was going to do well in school. The ironic thing about this is I really tried, but I had no interest in learning math. It just didn't interest me, you know, and I wasted years trying to learn algebra. Instead, I just decided to read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in senior algebra class, and I failed geometry twice. I have more F's on my report cards. I honestly don't know how I graduated from high school. I never did well in grammatical tests. I wasn't a really good reader. I needed glasses. I didn't have any, so that kind of makes sense. But if you were to look at my report cards, all of them together, you would not think that person was going to go anywhere in life. The good thing is you're not the sum total of your grades. That's the important thing to remember. There are other important lessons to learn. For me, it was taking care of a sick mother, very sick mother. And so, but nobody at school knew that was going on. Nobody understood the pressure and the kind of the tough childhood I was going through, you know. So you go into school, you have to conform, you have to make it through school, you have to pass tests, and if you're not good in things, then you fall behind. If you're not the cream of the crop, you feel bad about yourself. So all of those notes, you know, after a certain point, they got to me, and it's like, but I was visiting a school in my mid-50s, so I'm in my mid-60s now. So I was doing an auditorium visit, and a little 3rd grade boy raised his hand, first question, and he said, Judy Schachner. He gave me 3 syllables in my last name, which I like.
Yes.
Schachner. Yes. So he said, do you have ADHD? And I said, why do you ask, Mr. Man? And he said, because you're like me. You're crazy. And he liked it.
Yes.
And I thought, that was the 3rd time somebody said that to me or asked that question in like 2 weeks. So I went to a doctor, and I said I was diagnosed with having ADHD by a 3rd grade boy in Pennsylvania. And she was British. She looked a lot like the woman who was the game show host of You Are the Weakest Link. I used to make her say that to me every time I left the office. And I said, you know, he said I had ADHD. And she said, I've never tested you. And I said, no, you have not. She tested me off the charts, explained my whole life and why I could never finish anything. And so when I signed my first contract to finish a book, scared me to death because I thought,
because you don't finish anything.
I finished making 2 girls. But so, yeah, I mean, the great thing about school visits and talking to kids is that I can tell them, you don't have to be the best in your class to have a successful life. Because so much of what you learn, and also, I would bring home bad report cards all the time. And my parents always said to me, did you try your hardest? And I'd say, yeah. But they said, were you good? It's like, yeah, I was good. And that was the most important thing to them. You're a good person. That's the most important thing. When my children were growing up and I was a mom, it made me feel so comforted to know that I was not the best student. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in fancy clubs. We didn't have any money to take fancy lessons or anything. But what made me feel good is that if my kids struggled in a way or they weren't the best at something, doesn't mean they weren't going to be good in life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's not all about the report cards. There's more to learn than just read and write and arithmetic.
And thinking differently can create all of this and more.
Yeah, I mean, and thank goodness for, I was talking to kids. I found a quote the other, I forget when I found this, but genius is the stew. Mm-hmm. And I said to kids, what would we put, if we were to make a genius stew, what would we put in it? And so one kid said, we'd put Albert Einstein in it. It's like, yeah, I'd put Albert Einstein's socks in it. That would be delicious. So we were coming up with all these things that makes genius. Yeah. And what does make a genius? I mean, Albert Einstein had an incredible imagination. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't I don't think he was very verbal for a long time. I don't think he spoke until he was 4 years old.
I think it was 4, right? Yeah.
Something like that. So, as I say, if you were to look at me on paper, you wouldn't put any money on me. But I just drew all the time. Yeah. And if you do something enough, if you do it every day, and you do it with a lot of love, then perhaps you will grow up to be the thing that or do the thing that you love. And most frequently, kids who find something early, they, Emma, my oldest daughter, picked up a dead fish in a pond when she was 2, and she was fascinated by it and rubbed its little eyeballs. Showed it to 2 old women on the beach, which scared them. Uh-huh. And I thought, there's a future there. She's a paleontologist. Yep. It made sense.
Never know.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And again, the new book is Sarabella's Thinking Cap, and you can purchase that at thereadingbug.com and many other great independent bookstores across the country. Judy Schachner, thank you so much.
Thank you. You're a wonderful interviewer. Wonderful story.
Oh, Reading Bug, you're back. What did you think?
I think you're a great interviewer too, Lauren.
No, not about me. What did you think about Judy and Sarabella's Thinking Cap?
Oh, I love it, of course. I love the story and I love the art. It made me believe that I can do anything. What's really neat is that it's so different from the silliness of Skippyjon Jones or the cuteness of Dewey Bob. I'm amazed how one author can write and illustrate in such different styles. It makes me want to practice my own illustrations for our next Reading Bug adventure.
That sounds like a great idea, Reading Bug. Thanks for joining me for this Reading Bug Adventures author visit. We'll see you next time. To purchase any of the books you've heard about in today's podcast, please visit thereadingbug.com/authors. Our Author Visits podcast is produced by The Reading Bug, our family-owned children's bookstore in California, and sound mixing and mastering is done by the team at Resonate Recordings. To learn more about us, visit thereadingbug.com. And to get great books picked by independent bookstore experts at The Reading Bug, like me, and shipped monthly to your doorstep, visit readingbugbox.com. Reading Bug Box offers a personalized selection of great books based on each child's unique age and interests and reading level. Exciting and engaging children at every age with great literature and exclusive content like games, craft ideas, author-signed copies, and more. It's the kind of subscription service that only an independent bookstore can provide. For photos and fun details about our boxes, follow us on social media at Reading Bug Box. A very special thanks to Judy Schachner, to the entire staff of The Reading Bug, and to you, our listeners. If you like what you heard today, be sure to tune in again when we interview Caldecott winner Dan Santat and Aaron Reynolds with their new collaboration, Dude. And for original stories with music, be sure to tune into our episodes of Reading Bug Adventures, a story podcast by us for kids ages 2 to 9. Season 1 episodes are available now, and Season 2 is on the way. See you soon.